There is a massive disagreement about one of the most basic questions concerning Shadow of the Erdtree. Where are we? Is the realm of Shadow part of the lands between that's just hidden? Or is it a separate place entirely? How long has it been inaccessible? Is there any way for us to know? This is a topic that deserves its own discussion, so let's examine the evidence and see if we can find the invisible pull. So, full transparency. When I say there's disagreement, I mean between myself and most other people. I claimed in my duality episode that the realm of Shadow is physically separate from the lands between, and has been for a long time. And this informs my understanding of the entire DLC of Elden Ring. But after seeing the recent output from other prominent lore creators, and the sheer number of comments I've gotten pushing back on this, I think it will be helpful for me to explain exactly what I am seeing in the narrative. Maybe I'm wrong. I do think this disagreement is understandable, but there's a reason I am taking the position I am, and I hope discussing that reason will be helpful to all of us. This will be a more focused, lore-probing video than usual from me, but Between Meanings videos are a bit more freeform, and I think resolving this topic will inform our ability to extract themes from the game. So I'll begin by explaining the reasons why we would see the Realm of Shadow as a veiled part of the lands between. When Elden Ring first came out, many players noticed an unexplained pattern in the map. There's a large sea in the middle of the lands between, and along its perimeter, 6 divine towers. These towers are evenly spaced around a point that is covered by a cloud on the map, a tantalizing mystery that many people thought might hide DLC content in the future. Then, Shadow of the Erdtree was announced, and there was an interview by Famitsu with the creative director, Hidetaka Miyazaki, in which he said, "The Shadowlands in which the DLC take place are sundered from the lands between where the main story takes place. It has been removed from and hidden from the outside world." So, we knew the DLC was set in a place that was hidden from the world, and there was a cloud in the center of the base game's map, covering a place that people already expected would be connected to the DLC. Sounds pretty perfect. Then the DLC was released, and players found the Suppressing Pillar, which has a plaque reading, "The very center of the lands between. All manners of death wash up here, only to be suppressed." This pillar seems to explicitly say that it's the center of the lands between, which matches what people were already speculating about. Naturally, players examined the maps of the two realms more closely, resulting in overlay maps like this one, showing how neatly many of the nooks and crannies fit together. And the narrative that emerged from all of this is clear. The Realm of Shadow is the center of the lands between, and was physically connected to the rest of the continent, until Marika decided to hide it away, along with her own past, by covering it with a magical veil that prevents people from reaching this land of shadow, or even seeing it. This interpretation also gives us a way to understand the looming presence of the Shadow Tree. Several items, like the remembrance of the Shadow Tree avatar, explicitly say, "The Shadow Tree is the shadow of the Erdtree." So, interpreting the dark tree we see in the distance seems straightforward. It's a manifestation of the Erdtree as viewed through the veil, its shadow aspect. Moreover, this explains how Mesmer and his armies, along with a band of Carians, reached this place. It was just a normal place, until after they arrived, Marika sealed it off, and the war began in secret. The remembrance of Gaius implies that Radahn met Mesmer, and Mesmer seems to know what a Tarnished is, so that places the timeline pretty definitively. Mesmer left on his campaign around the time that Radagon became Elden Lord, after Godfrey had departed along with his Tarnished warriors. Then the Shattering began, so unfortunately for Mesmer, he never had a chance to get his hands on a great rune. This interpretation wraps up a lot of concepts really nicely, and it makes a lot of intuitive sense. The only problem is, well, everything. I'm trying to present this perspective, which I'll refer to as the central sea theory, in the best light possible, so that I can properly address the problems I see. So, what problems am I referring to? I, for one, did not read that Miyazaki interview, or engage in any discussion threads, or listen to any lore speculation before beginning Shadow of the Erdtree. It's important to me to have as blind of an experience as possible when approaching new Souls content, so I was focused on the story that was unfolding before me, on what the game was communicating to me directly. So here's what I noticed when I began the DLC. The game refers to the Realm of Shadow as a separate land, immediately and often, and both the Realm of Shadow and the lands between are surrounded by water. We can see the sky, so this place appears to be above ground, at sea level, and we see spirits, graves, and spirit graves everywhere. In fact, depending on which path we take, the enemies we encounter may almost exclusively be spirits or grave birds for the first hour or two of the DLC. This was my experience, and I remember thinking that the DLC was almost laying it on thick with presenting this place as a land of death. As we progress through the DLC, we find items that refer to the land of spirit graves, the place where all death eventually drifts, and we find the suppressing pillar, which says that all manners of death wash up here. The fact that death as a concept is suppressed by the Golden Order is a central theme in Elden Ring, so the idea that this land full of death has also been cut off somehow matches that, and all of the language about drifting to this place and washing up on its shores seems to emphasize this land's role as a separate land across the waters that death used to flow to before the Rune of Death was removed from the Elden Ring. But the Realm of Shadow, being a distant land separated by the waters and a historical land of the dead, is very different from seeing it as a relatively normal part of the lands between that was only veiled shortly before the Shattering. So which is it? We had a bunch of evidence in favor of the Central Sea theory, but let's look at that evidence again from a different perspective. Firstly, the interview. Miyazaki says that the land has been sundered, which is a pretty dramatic word. That evokes an image of a catastrophic primordial event, splitting the land in two. Notably, he doesn't say when this happened, or how, just that the two lands were once one, and are now two. Sounds to me kind of like the creation narrative that pervades all of the background lore. Creation through division. Lands, concepts, and souls had to be divided by the greater will to create the world as we experience it. We're talking about an ancient sundering event, not a recent surgical extraction. Moreover, if you read the interview again, he emphasizes the fact that this is a physically separate land, over and over again. The important part is the separation. Now let's look at the maps. If you just glance at an overlay map like this one, it sure looks like a good fit. But if you apply more scrutiny to it, the concept falls apart pretty quickly. Firstly, the Realm of Shadow is just too big to fit in the Central Sea. Look at the edges of the map. The Cerulean Coast is just sitting on top of Limgrave, and would be running directly into the Divine Bridge, leading to the Divine Tower, that's supposed to be part of its suppression mechanism. The jagged peak is completely covering the Divine Tower of Caelid. The Shadow Tree Chalice is directly on top of Lane Dell, which not only conflicts with the presence of an entire city in this location, but the Shadow Tree itself wouldn't actually line up with the position of the Erdtree. What's more, the very center of the lands between isn't actually lined up with the center of those 6 divine towers that began this whole thought process. Of course, this isn't the only overlay map. Community members presented multiple different versions of this overlay, such as this one, or this one. But they suffer from the same core problems. In fact, I went ahead and did a simple version myself for this video, so that we can see the problem directly. So here's the lands between, and here's the realm of shadow. We can pick one or two points of interest to line it up to, but then it won't match anything else. So here's what it looks like if we actually line the suppressing pillar up with the center of the divine towers. Most of the map isn't even inside the sea, and nothing else lines up well. Alternatively, we can get the northwestern corner to fit pretty snugly into the central sea, but then all of my previous points come back. There's no alignment of important places, and a bunch of the map still spills over onto the land. And note that I'm being super generous in my overlay by just leaving out all of the islands surrounding the Realm of Shadow. So where did they come from in this theory? But there's another issue that comes up from looking at the maps. If the Realm of Shadow was part of the lands between until it was veiled, then where are the roads, the bridges, the ports, anything that would actually connect people to this land? The Central Sea theory doesn't actually explain how an army entered the Realm of Shadow, because there's no path we can find. In fact, there is an extensive network of roads in the lands between, and they all go around the Central Sea, not through it. Nameless Singer has a video examining reasons to think that some of these roads predate the Golden Order, and Tarnished Archaeologist has given very good reasons to think that the Divine Towers are some of the oldest buildings in this fictional world. Were they built underneath a mountain, just in case the mountain needed to be moved one day? To be clear, I do think the lands between and the Realm of Shadow were physically linked at some point, just not recently, and not like this. As I mentioned in my duality video, the suppressing pillar plaque might be telling us that its location is connected to the lands between somehow, but there's room for us to decide how literal or metaphysical this link is. Perhaps there was a gate or passageway in the center of the lands between that used to lead to the Realm of Shadow before it was sealed, and that's what the veil in the sky symbolizes. Or perhaps the pillar is on the spot that was the center of the lands between in a primordial age, before some great cataclysm that reshaped the world, and because of that, the two lands are still metaphysically linked. I'm not trying to present a specific answer here, just to point out that whatever the connection is, it's a little more complicated than the Central Sea theory suggests. But if you're not convinced yet, then don't worry. I haven't even gotten to the main point yet. Let's think about the Realm of Shadow from a story perspective for a moment. What we know is that this land harbors secrets that Marika wants to keep hidden. In particular, Miyazaki notes in the same Famitsu interview that the Shadowlands are where Marika became a god, and where the Erdtree was born. It's understandable that Marika would want to keep secret the source of her own godhood, lest someone else try to repeat the process and ascend after her. But with that in mind, imagine if the Central Sea theory were true, if the Realm of Shadow was the center of the lands between until the time of Godfrey's departure and Radagon's coronation as second Elden Lord. That would mean that the Great Tower of Enir Elim would have been present and visible to the entire world until shortly before the Shattering. It would be one of the tallest and most recognizable buildings in the entire lands between. So how exactly was it a secret? There would be no point in hiding the Realm of Shadow if everyone already knew about it. Remember, in the Golden Order, people's lifespans are unnaturally long, especially for demigods and nobles. There are plenty of people who would have been around to see everything in the Land of Shadow, and yet no one in the lands between has ever heard of the Hornsent, or the Spiral Tower, or Spirit Graves. This is all novel to us, and if we focus on the occasional creature or object that looks familiar, we're ignoring the dozens of places, peoples, and creatures that are completely different. Clearly, there was some way to travel between these lands, but one did not simply walk into the realm of shadow. And there's another narrative issue with the Central Sea theory. If Marika had the ability to separate and hide away a whole region of the world, then why didn't she use this, say, to seal the mountaintops of the giants? It's clear from the spoken echoes you can hear from Melina that Marika was once a true believer in the Age of Plenty she was bringing about. She slew the giants and sealed off the path to the mountaintops in order to protect the Erdtree from the power of the Flame of Ruin. But if sealing this flame was a top priority for establishing the Golden Order, why not seal it in the Realm of Shadow? Why not do this to any of the places or people that threatened her orthodoxy? And if she couldn't, then why specifically could she veil the Realm of Shadow? Maybe there's a good answer to that question. But whatever it is, the point is that there must be something different about the Realm of Shadow that made it eligible for veiling, and whatever that difference is, it predated Marika. One of the big points I have been trying to make is that the Realm of Shadow has special status as a land connected to death. The nature of this connection is up to some interpretation, but there is something different about this place. Note, for instance, the Gravebird armor set, which says that the land of spirit graves is a place where all death eventually drifts. There are no spirit graves or grave birds anywhere else, only in the Realm of Shadow. How would one explain this realm's special relationship to death if it was, until recently, a normal part of the lands between? Let's look to Smowtown for a potential compromise. Smowtown has been advocating for the Central Sea theory for some time, but in a recent video, he says that he has changed his mind about many of the details. He says that now he believes the Realm of Shadow has been physically separate from the lands between since the beginning of the Golden Order, but it wasn't fully sealed off until later. Upon its initial separation, it was intentionally turned into a kind of underworld to serve as a land of death, so that under the Golden Order, death could exist in a separate space from the lands between, a land of life. This thematically matches how Smough thinks about the Shadow Tree, which is as a manifestation of all the chaotic and dark aspects of the world that are being suppressed and hidden by the Golden Order. Honestly, I applaud Smough for being so earnest and willing to update his perspective, and I really like the thematic reading of the Shadow Tree in his videos. However, there is still a problem with his most recent theory. It hinges on the idea that Marika would intentionally create a separate land of death to serve as a kind of afterlife. And the problem is, that's just not how the Golden Order functions. The primary goal of Marika's reign is to create an eternal order without death. That's why bodies are buried at the roots of the Erdtree, so that they will be reabsorbed and reborn into the lands between. There is no afterlife within the Golden Order, and Marika's failure to understand the importance of death is one of the most important themes of the entire story. What's more, if the Realm of Shadow was intended by Marika to serve as a separate, confined land of death, then why isn't the Rune of Death here? She removed destined death from the Elden Ring, and then hid it in Farum Azula, the city beyond time. So how would that comport with turning the center of the lands between into a separate death realm? Again, the point is that whatever connection the Realm of Shadow has to death must have already existed when Marika separated the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. The goal here isn't to put down Smough, by the way. I'm bringing him up because he is one of the best versions of the Central Sea theory I've heard, and I want to be as earnest as possible about considering the arguments that can work in its favor. For my money, everything about the Realm of Shadow communicates a sense of deep history, including its special role as a land of spirits and spiritual energy. I don't think that this special status emerged after Godfrey left, or even at the founding of the Golden Order. I think it was already a separate land of spirits when Marika was born here, and when she ascended to godhood here. We know Marika comes from this place, and we know that her people come from outside the lands between. Doesn't it make sense to think that this is that place outside of the lands between? The last thing I want to bring up is the Shadow Tree. The game does explicitly say that it is the shadow of the Erdtree, but what exactly does it mean by that? Remember that Famitsu interview? Well, Miyazaki also said this: "It is this shadow of the Erdtree that looms tall in the left background, and we also call this the Shadow Tree. So the DLC takes place not in the lands between, but the Shadowlands, of which the Shadow Tree is a symbol. Also, there is another hidden meaning within the title, which we hope you will figure out when playing the game." So, what is the hidden meaning of the title? It can't just be that this Shadow Tree is the shadow of the Erdtree. That's the surface reading. To get closer to the hidden meaning, let us consider the avatar of the Shadow Tree. This boss seems intimidating at first, covered in thorns and darkness, but it also emits golden light, and as the fight proceeds, the demeanor of this shadowy sunflower changes. It becomes weak, fearful, desperate. The music shifts. If not for that one deadly radiant nuke spell it casts, I might actually feel sorry for it. The storytelling of this boss is not that it is an avatar of chaos and darkness. The story I see is that it was once an avatar of golden light, but that light has been stolen away from it. I mean, it's literally a wilting sunflower. The source of light that it looked to is gone. Now consider the tablets in Eniralem and several other places that depict a great, upright spiral tree. I think this is a literal depiction of the Shadow Tree in the past. This tree isn't a shadow in the sense that it's the dark aspect of the Erdtree, but in the sense that the Shadow Tree represents what was left behind when the Erdtree was created. The image of the twisted Shadow Tree is an edict. Denounce their ways, do them harm, for they have abandoned us. There's another reason to think that the Shadow Tree is a disconnected, abandoned tree, rather than an aspect of the Erdtree. When we set the Erdtree ablaze in the base game, it has no effect on the Shadow Tree. Now, in the base game, setting the Erdtree on fire is one of the last steps before reaching the end. But this entire DLC is meant to be accessed by characters at the end of the game. A player having set the Erdtree on fire and then beginning the lengthy DLC should be an expected common occurrence. So if the Round Table Hold burns, and even Farum Azula is covered in embers from the burning Erdtree, then how is the shadow of the Erdtree itself unaffected? The only explanation I see is that it's a separate tree. The Shadow Tree was once a holy, radiant tree of its own. It only became a shadow tree once its light was stolen away. This is why its image is twisted and crumbling, unlike its appearance in ancient art. Its existence as the Shadow Tree, a tree that represents dark notions that bear no sense of order, is not its native state. It is a result of the tree losing its prior identity, as a golden tree connected to the energy of the Crucible. This is the lost history we can only learn about by looking into the shadow left behind by the birth of the Erdtree. So, in summary, there are many things that are open to interpretation. Perhaps the Realm of Shadow isn't specifically in the west, as I claimed. Maybe it's southwest, or maybe directionality stops making sense at all once you cross the fog. Maybe the lands between were sundered by a great meteor impact, or maybe a godlike being reached down and scooped part of the land out with its hand. My point today is just to make one thing clear. The Realm of Shadow was physically separated from the Lands Between long ago. By the time of the Hornsent and Marika, the sundering of these lands was already in the distant past. I don't intend for most of my videos to take on this debate-focused format, but the point I'm making seems to me pretty foundational to our understanding of Shadow of the Erdtree, both in terms of its literal history and its themes. Sure, one key thematic reading of the Realm of Shadow is as a container for all of Marika's secrets hidden under a veil. I said as much in my duality episode. However, if we take that reading very literally, it encourages us to stop delving. Everything is hidden away here just because Marika hid it. It's the thematic equivalent of saying a wizard did it. On the other hand, if we choose to see the veil in the sky as primarily symbolic, and read the Realm of Shadow as a distant land, passage to which was sealed by Marika, then we get all of the value of the hidden past of Marika reading, and we also get the chance to appreciate the rich, separate history of this new realm that we are only starting to understand. So, let me know if I've convinced you, or if you still have unresolved questions. Also, do please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with people who need to see it. I tried to keep this video focused on things that I am confident about, but for those who have asked to hear my more outlandish theories, I have another episode in the works that you may enjoy in the near future. Until then.